So, hello everyone. Welcome to the first online FinTech Dev Meetup. We're really happy to have you here. My name is Karen, for those who don't know me, and I am one of the organisers for this meetup group. So, for those who have joined us for the first time, welcome. The purpose of this meetup is to create a platform for sharing ideas and knowledge among the FinTech Dev community. And this meetup will have talks covering a really wide range of topics, including technology, work culture, within but not exclusive to the FinTech context. And the format for tonight will be 3 talks, followed by a short Q&A session. And since this is a live stream, please post your questions in the chat, and then we'll try and get through them, time permitting. So before I go into introductions for our 3 speakers, just a few notes and announcements. If you happen to be looking for a job, Westpac, my employer, has a few positions open. So we are looking for a intermediate to senior full stack or front end developer to work on a greenfield business online banking application. So if you're interested, please message me or Sass directly, who is one of the other organisers, and React would be ideal. Now, a few of the other speakers from Story and CN7 will also have some openings, but I'll let them speak to that. So let's get into it. So our first speaker is Malachi Cunliffe. Malachi is one of the most switched on people I know. He is a front-end developer working on business online banking products at Westpac, and he will be talking about non-fungible tokens. So can't wait to find out about more. Over to you, Malachi.
Awesome, thanks, Karen. Just getting my slides up. Have we got that all good? Yes, you have. Sweet. Thanks, Karen. So today I'll be talking about non-fungible tokens, or NFTs for short. I'm sure a few of you have already heard of NFTs. They've been quite hyped up in the recent year or two. So a simple meaning for an NFT is that it is a token or a unit of currency that is non-fungible or unique, as it cannot be exchanged for something else. The NFTs can represent digital or physical assets and act effectively as a certificate of authenticity to verify ownership. So what does fungible mean? So fungible is something that we use every day. So our currency as dollars. If I'm holding a $1 coin and you're holding a $1 coin, we both have equal value. Whereas if we own 2 houses, my one is on the west side of the street and yours on the, across the road on the eastern side of the street, they aren't exactly equal. How do we prove asset ownership? So currently, to prove asset ownership, like land or a house, these are sitting in the deed or a title, sitting in the Land Information New Zealand, which is a database of everyone in New Zealand and all the titles of land and who owns them. And another question we have to ask is, how do we prove who owns an NFT? Because this is now getting into the blockchain, and there's no central place where that is stored. It's stored on the blockchain, so it's very distributed. So talking about those 2 examples before of the property ledger of who owns what property, and comparing that to NFTs. So we'll first start with a centralized ledger. So Land Information New Zealand, they act as a centralized ledger that we as consumers of that information go to and request a piece of data from them. We want a record of X property because we want to see who owns it, or I've sold property, I need to change the ownership status of that property to this person. Now, when we come to NFTs, they're on the blockchain, and this is a decentralized ledger. So this is a distributed ledger. There is no one place you go to for this information. It's all publicly available. And when something needs to be changed, it's changed in a distributed way on the network. So what does that look like? When you want to change something on the blockchain, well, it's technically immutable, but a block after a previous block can update the state of that piece of data. So say we'll use a transaction. It can have any sort of data in it. It can be a ownership status of an NFT. It could be one Bitcoin, or it could be any other cryptocurrency that's hosted on blockchains. So that data is then packaged into something called a block. It'll be a set of transactions or set of data that needs to be moved and confirmed. That is then sent to all the nodes on the network, and they all form a consensus to say that this transaction is valid and it is approved. And that'll be added to the block at the front of the chain, and that'll then get put on there and distributed. So now all the other nodes in the system have the exact updated copy of that ledger. And that's how that would be done on the NFTs, instead of when we compare it to how changing land ownership is just a database addition. This is adding a whole new block to a chain of other blocks. So some of the uses that have come out of NFTs in the recent years, games. So some in-game content requires you to buy some experimentation. You have to buy a in-game asset as an NFT, and then it'll show up in your game account, which is really cool. There's also digital artwork. You can create, any one of us can go on one of the marketplaces and upload our artwork and mint it on the chain as a artwork for sale. There's collectibles. There's an example I'll show you soon. That's one of my favorite examples of this, of how people have created collections and collectibles, and they trade them online through NFTs. Music, there's been some artists that have released like an album, and then you can buy a NFT version of the album, and you can also sell that version of the NFT album as well. Also, some movies, there's been one example of a movie that got sold as a NFT version of it on the blockchain as well. So how do you value a non-fungible token? We value dollars in a particular way. We all know what the value of a dollar is. It's how much we get paid, how much we can buy with that dollar, and it's pretty steady, because otherwise we'd get paid a particularly more amount this day compared to the next pay cycle, when the value could be completely different. So very stable. We all know what the value of that is. It does increase over time with inflation, but it's very stable. So now, how do you value something that's non-fungible, and we don't have an idea of a set value for something? So one of the projects I'm going to talk about on NFTs is the CryptoPunks. So this was created by two creative technologists, and they just wanted to just do an experiment. And they created 10,000 uniquely generated, random generated, unique CryptoPunks, and they just gave them away for free. So they were just like, cool. On their blog, they just posted, we've got 10,000 unique NFTs. All you have to do is send us your address for your wallet, and we will just give them to you. And if you wanted 10, you just reply 10 times with your wallet address, and you've got 10 of these things. So 10,000 of them, there will only be ever 10,000 of them, and they've created them. And the proof of ownership is stored on the Ethereum blockchain. So just diving into some of the recent sales. So this was taken today. So as you can see, they're all quite recent. So bearing in mind, they were given away for free in 2017, given away for free. And now in 2021 and 2020, they've been selling for millions and millions of dollars, because of the inflated prices of Ethereum since the start of that. So what's driving all this value? So I know after the last few years, we had one in 2018 where everyone started talking about Bitcoin, and it was all over the news, and we had a whole big hype jump of everyone wanting to buy Bitcoin. That lasted a December, January, 3 months, and then sort of crashed a bit, and then it sort of just stayed sort of on the low down. No one really cared about it anymore. But then what was interesting is that as soon as the world went into lockdown, the interest started peaking again. As you see, just after the 2020 mark there, we had a massive influx. This isn't up to date. I did a new screenshot today of the current value, but this massive increase in value over the short amount of time has given rise to like people that have had Ethereum lying around. Now, if I want to buy like a digital artwork on a chain, I can just spend like it doesn't matter what the millions is. It's just I've got 1,000 Ethereum. I'll just buy this image with it and maybe sell it again for a higher price. I'll just go back to this slide here just as an example. So as you can see, CryptoPunk number 7 on the list was sold for $2.5 million August 4th of this year. And it's CryptoPunk number 7,252. And then if you look at number 5 on the top largest sales, that's that exact CryptoPunk number 7,252 was sold for 5.3 million 20 days later. So there's like a just insane amount of value being driven in these areas that it's just someone wants to buy it, so they buy it, and then they'll just wait for the next buyer to come along and buy it from them for more. One thing I want to also talk about is just Dogecoin or Dogecoin, because of the value of that as well has been very hyped lately. So it created in 2013 as a joke, market cap of 58 billion, which is insane for something that was a joke. We've also had endorsement of Dogecoin from Elon Musk and other celebrities and other groups around the world. And this is probably what's leading to these massive hype cycles in the cryptocurrency price ranges. So as we can see, that tweet was made on February 4th. And exactly on February 4th, the price was 3 cents. And shortly after that, it sort of doubled to maybe 6 cents or 8 cents, or 0.8, no, 8 cents, reading too many numbers. And then we ended up in April, and that's when we started getting the groups on like Reddit that were really like keen on this going up to $1. So that was the whole thing of like, yeah, we need to get Dogecoin to $1. Everyone like talk about it. So there's a clearly like building hype around these assets and trying to pump them up. And obviously, once it hits a high point, everyone that had from the beginning then sells, and then the market crashes a little bit more and more. So there's these little cycles of things going on and on. So I don't know how sustainable it is long term. Maybe it'll even out at the end, but at the moment, the NFT marketplace is basically just going up and maybe leading to these cycles of currency inflating. So where to next for crypto? No one knows. We'll have to just see what happens. But things like NFTs, as we just saw, one got sold 20 days later for over double the value at 5.3 million US dollars, and for a digital image that I could copy and paste on my laptop if I wanted to have the image, but I don't have the true ownership status of it. So I would need to pay $5 million to be the true owner of that asset instead of just being the owner of an image of the asset. Yeah, awesome. That's all I had to say. I hope it was interesting conversation starter, a bit of knowledge sharing about some other things that are happening in the financial world, like crypto side of things, and some things that are valued at some insane amounts of money.
Thank you so much for that, Malachi. Do we have any questions from our viewers? So Sebastian and Sass are our moderators. I know I've got one.
I have a. There's no questions on the chat, so if you have a question, Karen, fire away, and I'll probably ask a question as well myself.
Yeah,
hasn't caught up yet, so.
Right.
Maybe 5 to 10 seconds.
So my question is it a scam? Is it a scam, Malachi?
Is what a scam? What in particular?
Selling these non-fungible tokens for a image that you can copy and paste.
I guess you could be looked at it in that way, but also there are buyers and sellers, right? So if someone wants to buy it off your hands and they're happy to pay more price, and if they want to own the asset, then I guess that's up to them to make that call, right? I suppose they are expecting it to increase in value, which I suppose hopefully it does happen for them. Otherwise, they would have made a loss of a lot of money.
Yeah.
I don't think it's a scam necessarily. It's just a marketplace of people wanting to buy things for the value that they've decided it would be. Yeah, Good question.
So we have a question from Annie. Do smart contracts work with NFTs as well?
So NFTs are basically smart contracts that are like mini contracts that prove ownership. So they keep a state of like who owns what asset. So when you mint something on the chain, you're basically putting a smart contract on the Ethereum blockchain that says it's for this purpose and it is on the system for these tokens to be traded. So there are marketplaces like OpenSea that have their own, you can mint things and they run the contracts behind the scenes for you, so you don't have to worry about all the complexities of setting it up. If that answers your question. It's a use of smart contracts, I would say.
All right. So who would actually buy those NFTs apart from people who potentially have lots of money? You mentioned that someone who holds cryptocurrency already and it's high value, they may just decide to spend a small chunk of it and then wait maybe for an opportunity to sell it. Again, is this pretty much for the kind of speculative market at the moment, or what do you reckon? Who would buy this kind of token?
Yeah, I would say it's a very speculative market. I guess if you had a lot of money lying around and you wanted to show it in a way online that could also make you more money, you'd buy one of those. And if you were the owner, it would prove you must have a lot of crypto assets to be able to just afford one of those. And people also show it off on their online presence. They'll have like their token as a proof ownership of I own this one. It's part of the whole hype of it, right? So yeah, I would say it's very speculative, but yeah, there's just tons of them. So this is just a specific example of one that's very highly valued. There are other ones of people just like making digital artwork and selling them there, and those only go for, it ranges, but generally you can get ones for like $10 or $20 or hundreds of dollars or thousands of dollars or millions of dollars. It depends how much you want to pay, to be honest. But yeah, there's a whole market. I've shown you one example of a huge like entity of trading that's happening, just because I thought it was a cool example. But yeah, there's definitely a lot going on. Yeah.
And just to add to the discussion, keeping the NFT aside, crypto itself has many other applications. So this is not meant only for trading or as an investment. So it's what I kind of see crypto as currency exchange. So we are valuing the particular smart contracts or a particular technology and trading the technology weight as a shares, rather than it's just for investment. It has other applications too, which are more valuable than just the investment.
Yeah, 100%. There's so many more applications that we could use this for. And in the beginning, it was never, Bitcoin was never intended to be an investment. It was purely to be a transactional, like a feature. It was just purely a way to transfer value from one wallet to another, but it's turned into this whole other thing of a hyped up value system. So yeah, I agree with you. There's other uses we could use the blockchain for. But yeah, there's this massive hype around it that's causing this massive value.
Okay, I have 2 more questions in the chat, so I'll just quickly fire away. So Sas is asking, if you buy an art object, I get to own it. If you buy an NFT, I don't own the actual object, rather than a token that proves some intangible ownership. Is this really sustainable long term?
Exactly. That's my exact question as well.
Right.
Is this even valuable? Do we even need NFTs?
That's a good point.
Like, do we need to use blockchain to verify someone's ownership? Why? There's already systems in place that are databases of ledgers. Like the bank is a ledger itself. We're not going to distribute that ledger because we need to know that we can only make changes to a ledger, or the property one. It's only the Land Information New Zealand organization that can make changes to that, or they only allow certain people to make changes to that because it's a security thing. So when you apply blockchain to stuff, it becomes more, does everyone need to see what's going on in there, or can it be a ledger behind the scenes or a database behind the scenes that only specific things can be viewed and changed at certain times? So yeah, I 100% agree. I don't know if it is the future, or do we even need this to exist? Is it just a niche thing?
And then Fiona is asking, she's saying, exciting research. Being in this generation of modern tech, what emotion score would you give yourself to invest in NFTs?
I don't currently own any NFTs. I don't think I will buy any NFTs at the moment. It's a very exciting area to be in. But yeah, you'd have to have been in early, or you'd have to make your own NFT collection and really market it well. Yeah, which should be it. But it's really interesting to see cool stuff that's happening around the place. But I don't give investment advice.
I love that honesty. Cool. All right. So let's keep things rolling. If you've got any more questions, just pop it in the chat. And if we've got time at the end, we might circle around or not. So let me introduce our next speaker, Ilya Sidorenko. Sidorenko, sorry. So Ilya is a software engineer and entrepreneur and is currently working with React Native at Story, and he is going to be talking about the woes of writing your app with Redux Saga. Take it away, Ilya.
Awesome. Thank you, Karen. Okay, I'm going to present my screen. Cool. Can you guys see my screen?
Yep.
Yes.
Awesome. All right. So today we're going to be talking about the woes of writing your app with Redux Saga. Some of the practical hurdles and challenges that I've encountered while working with Redux Saga in a relatively large code base. And yeah, I guess some of the things I didn't like about Redux Saga. Hope I can shed some light into that, and yeah, just share some of my knowledge. So yeah, we're gonna start off with a quick introduction into the key concepts of Redux Saga, just to get you guys up to speed. And we're gonna use those concepts later on to explain what the hurdles are and what are the ideological mismatches that lead to some of the problems in your code. Yeah, it will help us later. So yeah, first off, what is Redux Saga? If you go on their website and you read the tagline, it's gonna say an intuitive Redux side effect manager. Yeah, and there's a lot to unpack in that tagline. So first off, it's a side effect manager. We're gonna break that down a bit later. Then it's for Redux, and it does claim to be intuitive. And then that's something that is that we're gonna look into this talk. So yeah, it is a side effect manager. It manages side effects, but we're going to explore what side effects are in a bit as well, just as a quick refresher. But in other words, Redux Saga is a Redux middleware meaning an extension to the Redux library that allows you to add async logic into your Redux application. If you used Redux Thunk before, it's pretty similar, although with some differences. So yeah, first off, why do you need Redux Saga? And you mainly need it to fetch content from the network or to do any asynchronous operations. So fetching content is asynchronous, and if you use Redux only, it's synchronous, and you can't really do anything with say with the fetch API, with network calls, with XHR or what have you. So some smart guys out there came up with the solution, Redux Saga, which is a synchronous API which plugs into your Redux and allows you to do asynchronous actions. Yeah. So Redux Saga is a way to write those asynchronous actions, such as fetching content from your network. So the way to write async operations in Redux Saga is by using so-called sagas. How does that saga actually look like? We're gonna dive into an example. We're gonna make an application, and we're going to look into some code samples of those sagas. So yeah, let's pretend I'm making an Instagram clone, and I want to pull a photo from the network. This would be the example of a code I would write. So you can see on the screen is an example of a saga, which fetches a photo from the network. And yeah, it is an asynchronous operation. Since we're fetching stuff from the network, it takes time to actually download this JSON object. So yeah, it has to be asynchronous. Let's actually take this piece of code apart. Yep, so we're fetching a photo, and first line over here, we have a JavaScript generator function. We're not going to dive too deep into what the generator function is, but it's essentially a way to write a JavaScript function. And that's the way you write a Redux saga in this library. It starts with function star, so that's an important point, and every Redux saga has to use this syntax. It's a bit scary, and it actually puts off a lot of newcomers into the Redux saga library. So it's sort of one of the hurdles, like one of the first hurdles, is that it's not really accessible for newcomers who want to learn more about this library. It requires understanding of this complicated syntax. Then in our next code piece, we have a way to call fetch API. So you might have used fetch API before, and usually it's just two simple calls. You have to do fetch URL, and then that returns a response. And after that, you just await on that response and get a JSON or a text string. It's very similar in Redux Saga, but you have to use special generator syntax. Again, this is pretty convoluted, and it puts off newcomers to this library. So finally, after we fetch the data, we're going to dispatch a Redux action, and yeah, that's just a simple Redux action that you might have seen in Redux if you used Redux before. So you have a type is photo fetch succeeded. So yeah, our photo fetch has succeeded. We successfully got the data, and then payload is that data. So that would probably be a nice JSON object of your photo of that Instagram clone app that we're developing. So yeah, this is an example of a saga in Redux Saga library. So, okay, how do you actually use a saga? How do you use this piece of code that we've just written? We don't want it to be just sitting around in a code base as that code. Let's connect it up to the rest of our logic. Yeah, I guess this is a good time to say that sagas are side effects. And yeah, what are actually side effects? Side effects are a piece of logic which happens outside of your main control flow. It's something that happens when an action happens. It's other code that is executed alongside it. So it's an effect which happens on a side. So in terms of Redux sagas, it helps you to jazz up your existing Redux actions. When a certain Redux action happens, a Redux saga gets kicked off, and logic in it actually gets executed. So they are helpers to your main synchronous Redux flow. They happen when those Redux actions come through. Yeah, so sagas are side effects, and they're happening on the side. So yeah, we've just written our Redux saga. We just have it here as a I've just condensed it a bit so it doesn't take up too much space. And now let's create what is created, an effect creator. Effect creator in Redux Saga is a way to listen for Redux actions and to kick off a saga when that Redux action happens. So this is how you connect that side effect to the rest of your code. You have to create an effect creator. And finally, we have our component. In this case, it's a photo page. Yeah, a simple photo page component. We have a dispatch. We dispatching a Redux action when component mounts, and displaying the actual photo when the photo is loaded. Yep, so we have three pieces of code to set up this Redux Saga flow. Our actual Saga, an effect creator, which connects up the Saga to a Redux action, and then the React component itself. Yeah, well, what's an effect creator? Effect creator is a way to listen for Redux actions and kick off sagas when those actions happen. To sum it up, here's how to use Redux Saga. You define a saga, use the effect creator to connect it to Redux action, and then actually dispatch Redux action in your component. Yeah, just 3 steps. So, okay, so what is wrong with this setup? Spoiler alert, everything. So yeah, first off, sagas are side effects. And side effects are bad. Side effects happen outside of your main control flow. They are hard to reason about since they happen on the side, and if you have a lot of them, it gets quickly out of hand and it is hard to debug. You can't return values out of side effects, and that comes as an asterisk because in terms of Redux sagas, you can return values out of them, but it's not commonly used. And finally, if you use Redux Saga, putting all of your business logic in side effects is just not good, but Redux Saga actually forces you and encourages you to put all of your business logic in side effects. And that causes a lot of problems that later down the road. So yeah, let's just dive deeper into each one of those points. Yeah, so first of all, side effects are bad. It is an imperative approach in the age of functional programming. Redux itself is a very functional library, and if you're using an imperative approach, imperative programming with Redux, it kind of defeats the purpose of using Redux altogether, since you're mutating state in very uncontrollable ways. All the debuggability, all that reasoning that you could easily do on your Redux actions, it suddenly is gone because you have all of those side effects just happening in your store. Side effects are not a pure function. They don't really have well-defined outputs, so they're really hard to test. There are some solutions and test harnesses for Redux Saga, but they're all just workarounds around the fact that it's quite hard to test side effects. Then yeah, side effects are hard to reason about. It's hard to compose side effects. You have to create a separate effect creator for every side effect to actually connect it up to the rest of your logic. It makes it hard to compose them. You have to go through an extra step each time you try to debug them. Yeah, and debugging with effect creators is just hard. Yeah, and let's continue with our Instagram clone. Let's try to make a bit more logic around it. Let's say we're going to make 3 network calls in a succession when you're opening up a comment section. So we're going to fetch a comment, then we're going to fetch the post of that comment, and then we're going to fetch the user of that post. So yeah, I mean, if you're using GraphQL, that's usually not a huge task, but let's imagine we're just using a regular REST API. We're making 3 requests. And yeah, let's just try to make it in Redux Saga. And on this slide, I've written some code which implements exactly those 3 calls. And what we have here is essentially an effect creator spaghetti. I'm not quite sure if you guys see the code, but essentially we have an effect creator for comments, and then the Saga for comments, then effect creator for posts, then the Saga for posts, then effect creator for users, and finally the Saga for users. All in all, quite a lot of code. I don't expect you guys to read this code just to demonstrate you the amount of boilerplate you have to write if you wanna implement those 3 network calls. And here it's rewritten in Redux Thunk, which is another library which provides asynchronous operations in Redux. It is actually way more compact, and it is, I believe, simpler to follow. Here we have just 3 functions. Each function is a Redux Thunk action, and they simply call fetch API and then dispatch a succeeded action. All in all, there's still a lot of boilerplate. Unfortunately, you can't really get away from boilerplate when you're using Redux, but it's much less. Yeah, let's finally, Sagas don't really return values, and that comes with an asterisk. You actually can make them return values, but it's not been well documented. And from my experience, no one's really using that feature. Oftentimes, you either abstract out your logic in the separate function, in which case you would be really questioning why you're using Redux Saga to begin with, because you already have separate functions for your actions. You're not really utilizing the library all that well, or you save the return value somewhere in Redux Store, which is just a hacky solution to this problem. Yeah, then all your business logic is just forced to be written as side effects. When you're a hammer, everything looks like a nail. When you're using Redux Saga, you end up writing everything in Redux Sagas. And ultimately, it's just not very sustainable for big apps. Yeah, it is very tempting to put everything into Sagas without giving much consideration about composability and how it's going to be debugged later. Finally, there are other issues, replayability. So if you want to use Redux DevTools and you want to use the replay feature, that's not going to work. It's still an open issue on GitHub, and they still haven't shipped a working version of Redux Saga with replayability. And then hot reloading is not possible. I haven't seen any Redux Saga setups which have hot reloading working. So that's quite a bummer. In summary, Redux Saga provides great building blocks for building your application, but the default approach of using side effects just leads to a lot of composability issues and debugging difficulties. And as well as just the steep learning curve of unfamiliar syntax and yeah, debug issues. So yeah, that's all for my talk. Thank you a lot. Yeah, please subscribe to my socials. I have my LinkedIn, I have my Twitter. Yeah, please follow, as well as please subscribe and like. And I think we're on to the asks section. Is it right, Karen?
Yes, thank you for that. Just before we get on to that, did you want to talk a little bit about your intern?
Yeah, that's right. So this year, this summer, we're hiring an intern at Story. So if anyone knows React and is a student, you are more than welcome to find us on the Summer of Tech website and apply. Thank you.
Nice. All right. We've got a couple of questions in there. I'll hand it over to you, Sebastian.
All right. So let's just go in a chronological order. So
Cool.
The first question is, what would you recommend to developers looking to migrate away from Redux Saga to something more modern like hooks?
Oh yeah, a good alternative would be use Reducer if you're using hooks, or even React Context. React Context is great. Or if you still want to stick with the Redux ecosystem, go for Redux Thunk. But React Context is the way to go these days.
Fantastic. I have to look at it myself. I haven't heard about this one. Okay, Molly's asking, is there any good reason to use this in 2021?
Frankly speaking, no. Redux Saga has been last updated 2 years ago. And by the looks of it, it's not really going forward with the updates. So yeah, at this point, it's a bit of a dying framework. So yeah, you should not be using it in 2021 unless you're dealing with a legacy code base.
Yes, it's not always possible to make the choice, right?
Yeah.
And I had a question about, like, do you reckon where this complexity is coming from? Is it just limitations of JavaScript or maybe the nature of React? And could it, obviously there's alternatives you provided that seem to be simpler, but I'm curious about the, why was it so complicated?
Yeah, so I think it's two reasons. One is the steep learning curve of Redux Saga. Well, the Redux Saga itself doesn't provide a really good documentation. It gives you an example of how to create a Redux Saga, and it kind of leaves you there without explaining more advanced topics, such as how to compose them together.
Mm-hmm.
So you're left with just one concept, and then you try to use that concept in more advanced settings, and it just breaks down. So I think there's just a failure of good documentation. Like if you study Redux Saga enough, it is actually really useful, and you can do like everything that you can do with Redux Thunk in it. It's just usually harder to do it.
All right.
And the other part is the steep learning curve, because it uses generators. It's often is very hard to know what you can and what you cannot do, just because of that weird syntax.
All right. And Annie is asking, for someone who comes from more of a backend development background, is Redux Saga a bit like old school event-driven programming?
That's a great question. Actually, yes, I can see that. Yeah, because when you're using events are sort of like side effects, and you would be listening for a certain event, and you would be kicking off a job based on an event. It is really similar. So yeah, that's quite similar. Yes.
All right, thank you. I don't think we have any more questions.
Cool, awesome. All right, so let's move on to our last speaker, who is Walter Lim, a random dude we just found loitering around Westpac. So we just got him to fill in the time. We'll see how it goes. I'm joking.
Oh, yeah.
I'm joking.
Oh, yeah?
Walter
Thanks,
is a senior
thanks, Karen.
designer from
Thanks, Karen. Yeah.
Sin 7. All right.
Oh, man.
No, he's going to tell us about how to keep design and engineering aligned with Figma and Storybook.
Oh, thanks, Karen.
All right, over to
give
you.
me 2 seconds to step into it. Okay, present your entire screen, do the thing, share, and let's wait for everything to load. Okay. All right, everything looks good. Great. Okay, so welcome to my talk. I'm Walter Lim. I'm a designer at a small company called Sin 7, and we make inventory software. Now, the thing is, up to this point, most of our, product process involved just engineers and product people. The product people thought of things to build, validated it, sent it off to engineering, and that was it in terms of alignment. That was all we got in terms of design. Now, I joined about a year ago and started to set up some of the design process at Sin 7. And just going to talk about what kind of things worked and what didn't. So for the purpose of this talk, we're not going to talk about how things happen asynchronously, like how multiple projects happen in tandem. We're just going to talk about single track agile. So if we're building a contact form or if we're building a checkout page, everything happens synchronously. One thing happens at a time. Now, when we talk about our process, here's a typical example of product process from start to finish. You have your UX researchers or business analysts or product people. They do some market research or some user research. They come up with things to, they hypothesize product ideas, features, whatnot. They might make a Miro, they might scribble on some paper, and they might write some specifications. Designers might test those specifications. They might test for viability, usability. They might play around with Figma. They might play around with XD. They might play around with Sketch, or in short, rectangle drawing tools. And once they think they're done, they hand over to developers who turn those rectangles into a real app with logic. So in other words, rectangles that pass data around. For the purpose of this talk, we will talk about the handoff process from when the wireframes or rectangles are done, or when people think they're done, when designers think they're done, and they get handed off to developers who then, build it. Now, here's the one of the main pain points we face so far at Sin 7. Design and engineering don't always sync up. You might hypothesize that this design and this user flow and these functional specifications will work, but then by the time it goes through that entire process, what the customer ends up seeing might be slightly different in certain places. And over time, these little discrepancies end up, adding up consistently and snowballing. So while you might have some really beautiful wireframes that you have user validated to hell and back, you've done hundreds of user test sessions, usability testing, what the customer might end up seeing, because everything's not in sync, would be, a little more different than you'd like. So how did we address this? We do automated checks to make sure that what you see in whatever wireframing tool you use or whatever design you use ends up aligning with what the customer ends up seeing in the web browser when it comes to, in this scenario, websites. Now, we do this with 3 tools. Figma for the wireframes that we test with users, Storybook for the documentation that developers use, and a little plugin called Storybook Add-on Designs that lets you put a Figma file side by side with your Storybook component. So let's jump into a little demo. So as a developer, this might be what you're used to working with every day. You might have a development environment, a text editor in front of you, and compared to what you saw earlier, compared to what you saw earlier, where are we? Compared to what the designer sees, this is what you see. Now, if your development practice is a little mature, you might have a tool called Storybook, which lets you document components and, well, allow you to play around with the different properties that you might have built, other developers might have built in for you. So you don't have to write CSS, you don't have to write additional code to put what's already on screen. Now, what we have here is a way to surface up the design and put it next to the piece of code, what the code runs. So in this case, this is the developer is completely different to what the wireframe is. Now, because we've identified it, we put it side by side, it's easier to, well, compare. It makes it easier to fix. So let's fix that right now. I'm going to go to the code. I'm going to, I wonder who put Comic Sans here. I'm going to change this to what it should be. Border radius looks really messed up, so I'm going to fix the border radius so that it looks correct. And I'm going to put in the correct color. Okay. Well, even closer, thankfully. One more thing. Cool. Now what I ship is close to what I've built in well, what I've designed. Again, it helps well, reconcile discrepancies with what the customer sees, which is this used, and what we design with, which is the Figma component right down here. It's really especially useful when you look at larger composite components where you have well, let's example. This is a example of a component made out of several other components. So we have an icon, we have some text, we have a button, and this forms a little action card that we use when we want to explain more advanced actions. So one of the things we notice is the two small discrepancies. There's a discrepancy with the text, but it allows us to identify things like responsive behavior. So in this case, when you look at this wireframe, it looks a lot nicer than what's in action because it's constrained. There's a max width set on this component, whereas in the actual code, it stretches out to fill the parent, whatever, well, it stretches out. So if you have a 4K screen, that's going to look horrific. So again, this helps us identify discrepancies and bring what you ship closer to what you design and test with, which ends up as, well, which hopefully helps you ship better product faster. Your product managers are happier because it means smaller estimates. A lot of your developers are happier because it means they don't have to write CSS, and developers can help, well, do some QA. And your designers are happier because, well, what they design is what gets shipped. So yeah, that's it from my end. Does anyone have any questions?
I
That
don't
is
see
so cool.
any questions, but I'm really impressed. And so how do you set it up? How to get this stuff going? Because I'm not really a front-end developer, so maybe it's obvious to front-end developers, but I have no clue.
Okay.
What would you do to actually get started with this in the team?
So it's literally 3 settings. So you have well, first of all, you need to install a tool called Storybook. which, well, there's documentation for that. And this is simply a plugin that sits on top of that. So I'm going to pull up my files. You're simply adding a, hold on, where are we? Where did it go? Too many files. Preview, no, preview head, no, main, yeah, there. Yep. So you're setting up so what you can do is you can either set this up as a separate repo where you dump your components in here, your TypeScript components or your Java components, your JSX, whatever components you want, and you just define what you want to show in the editor. So for example, hold on, let me shrink this a bit so it's easier to work with. Button, yeah, there we go. So in this case, we've pulled a button from Material UI. We've just given it some styling. And this is used in, well, most of our apps. Now, to find it in Storybook, we use what's called a stories file, which defines, well, okay, you have a component. What do you want? How do you want to show it in the editor? So if you look at this function here, you'll see we have a REST a button here defined, and we have some parameters set. You set your parameters here for the Figma file, which is what gets surfaced up when we go to the file itself.
All right, that's fantastic.
Again, a bit hard to explain in a few minutes, but you install Storybook, you install the plugins, you link to your Figma file, and yeah, you have an easier way to get parity.
That is so awesome.
Yeah, just a question from my side. So the plugin does exist only for the VS Code at the moment, or is it cross-compatible with any other IDEs?
It works with any IDE. It's just a Node package.
Perfect. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah. Sweet.
Cool. Awesome. Are you able to post the links to those plugins somewhere?
Can do. Yep, can do. And yeah, hope you found that useful.
Yeah, that's so cool. Did we have any other questions?
No, I don't think there's any questions. Annie's asking about what plugins do you need to install, but I guess you're gonna push the you're gonna push the links somewhere, and there's probably a slight delay, so she might not have heard this yet.
Yeah, can do.
And Binny is asking, can you share documentation for the add-on?
Yep, can do. More than I'll post that in a moment. So yeah, thank you. My website is down below for all the social links, and oh yeah, I've completely forgot to mention about the roles.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah. Okay, so we're hiring I think we've got about 30 open roles at the moment. Specifically, I'm hiring for a junior to intermediate designer, as well as a senior designer to do some really cool, to work on some really cool stuff. We're growing, we've got crazy rocket ship growth at the moment. Lots of stuff is happening. The company is really grasping the value of design, and yeah, lots of cool things are happening. We also have a lot of engineering, sales, QA, support roles available. So yeah, get in touch. We're also competing with Westpac for people.
I was just going to say, if you work at Westpac, those roles are not open to you.
Westpac people, come hither. Just kidding.
Awesome. Thank you all. Thanks all for joining us. Yeah, so if you have not joined as a member on the Meetup group, please join us. And our next event will be mid-October, so keep an eye out for that event. And if you do join as a member, you will get a notification. Anything else I need to say before we finish up? Yes, that's right. So we are a newish meetup group. We are always looking for speakers. So if you would like to speak at one of our meetup events, do get in touch as well. And yeah, that's it from me. Is there anything from the speakers? Any last dying questions? Okay. All right, we will wrap it there. So have a good evening, everyone, and take care. Stay safe.
See you guys.
Awesome. Awesome.